Sounds good? Okay. Okay.
We'll start.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here on this beautiful Thursday evening. I'll try my best. Slavika and I will try our best to get us out of here maybe a little early. Only because some of you have been around a lot know that Thursday's my Grey's Anatomy night, and I hate to be late for it. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll start with our introductions as always, and we'll start with AE.
Ann Elizabeth, oh, it's for the Ann Elizabeth, AE, Globeville, and Planet Earth. That's all. Remember that.
Vernon Hill, Globeville, JJJ Properties.
Juan Veloz, representando Liria y Swansea.
Juan Veloz, representing Illyria and Swansea.
Tiana Kennedy, CSU Spur.
Go Aggies.
Michael Bouchard, Mayor's Office of National Western Center.
Slavica Park, co-facilitator, and basically just here keeping an eye on Terrence.
People have tried before and failed. Terrence Carroll, co-facilitator and board of the National Western Stock Show.
I'm Urbano, co-director of the GS Coalition. Hi, I'm Nola Miguel with the GS Coalition.
John Sapien, Globeville. Larry Burgess, property owner of Bright Boulevard.
Ann Hayes, Leary, Swansea, Westfield.
Free Dutch Chair of the Swansea Neighborhood Association.
Armando Payan, Globeville.
Tina Martinez, Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
Susan Aldretti, Office of Councilwoman Ortega.
And we have two people, one person in the back. Here.
We have two.
I'm lost.
I know.
Jim Garcia, Deputy Community Health Center.
You have to introduce yourself. Oh, I missed it. Sorry.
Would you like to introduce yourself again?
You want a formal introduction?
Alfonso Espino, the area resident.
And lastly, Jesse Zamora, Ciara.
Again, thank you all for being here. Our agenda tonight mainly focuses on, or primarily focuses on, our conversation from last month and trying to land the plane on this, which is reimagining the CAC. What should it look like? Where should it be? And I'll hand it over to Slavica to start this because quite a few people did a survey, and she has the results of the survey and what people are thinking, and we want to use that to frame the conversation.
Slavika, do you have any more copies of that? Or you can share them with
More than happy to share mine, so just if you
Are there more copies if anybody else comes in?
Yep.
Survey.
Can you and I share one?
Yeah, just spare one here.
Okay. Okay. So first and foremost, really thank you all for staying engaged. I thought our last month's meetings was really excellent, a lot of really good conversation. And also wanted to thank many of you who have submitted responses to the survey that we have put forth to just continue that conversation. So a lot of great feedback and a lot of great suggestions around how CSC should look like moving into the future. Where should it go? What should it be when it grows up and so forth? So I'm just going to provide you with a very quick summary of the survey responses and hope that we continue engaging in a conversation this evening and see if we landed some decision or if you need to continue conversations afterwards. So one of the questions was if these meetings were no longer to be facilitated by the two of us here, where should it go and who should assume the facilitation of these meetings? Some of the responses we received were some folks thought there is nothing wrong with how it is. We had some folks who suggested that it perhaps would not be good to have a completely independent facilitator of these meetings that's perhaps not even associated with the project. We had some folks who thought that it should be moved to the authority given their role and what it's headed. And then folks also said perhaps the combination of the authority and the city. So looking at all the responses, the two that kind of got most votes or what the folks were leaning towards were authority or the combination of the authority and the city. As far as what the role should be, should it change? What the current role of this advisory board is? Should it become something else? Should it become the same? I think there was a lot of comments in regards to that it would be really nice to have a slightly better defined goals of the CSE, goals and the role as well, maybe redefining that role a little bit. A little bit of a decision making, suggesting that certainly the group continues in its advisory role for the phases 3 to 8. But little discussion around what is it advisory, what is it decision making, and so forth. Comments about that the group should definitely represent GS and that the group should be appointing somebody to be the member on the board. Looking into much broader neighborhood plan, not just National Western, and how does it all fit in. So these were all some of the comments and suggestions we have received. Again, the focus looking more into collaborative process, looking into how the future programming of this campus impacts a much broader community and how to bring the community in and also how to bring the programming to the community. Looking at the benefits agreements to the community in general as the focus of this group. As far as the agenda, certainly there were a lot of comments that folks would love to see more of the interaction and a working group feel to this rather than just being presented to or talked to by us and the partners, but rather using this time as a working time. Bringing in guest speakers as the new projects are starting and also looking at perhaps adjacent businesses or nonprofits and how to incorporate them by bringing them in first as guest speakers and then seeing what their role is. We asked about the frequency of these meetings because since I've been part of this, and I know way before that it's pretty much been monthly. And so there were suggestions to keep it on as needed basis as far as the schedule or potentially quarterly, but then have a lot of subgroups and working groups that meet in between that. So location, pretty much I think this was the only question that there was a really broad consensus. Everybody, with the exception of one person, agrees that it should remain somewhere here on the National Western Center's site. Some folks were saying over at the authority, some folks were saying how about one of the new buildings, but pretty much keeping it here on this site. One person suggested that perhaps it be moved outside, that it actually gives even more independency to the group into potentially a new plant center on the Washington Street. And what else did we have? Who else should be at the table? This is the CSE. These are the members, and most of you have been at this table longer than I have been, since 2016 or 17. But suggestions were to really invite some broader community members. Definitely to also invite some businesses, especially small businesses, from this neighborhood, and GS Coalition was named also as one of the partners that should be invited to the table. So that's kind of like a really brief summary of all the comments that we have received. I have received 11 comments, which I thought was pretty good for the size of our group. And from here, I'd love to turn it back to you to continue the conversation. Maybe looking first, tackling that number one around the facilitation. And just to kind of bring you back a little bit, actually, it was really surprising to me. One of the responses to the survey was really not being clear on the CRL's role. Who are we and what the role is, which, again, and it was a member who's been around for so long. So just a little bit of clarity on that. I mean, CRL, we represent Stock Show, and we've been, Maria and the team have been gracious enough to volunteer and to facilitate these meetings with parents since the very beginning. But we are looking really, is the time to transition, given that partners are way ahead now and, bringing in programming, and the authorities doing way more and, assuming way more responsibility and role. So that's how the whole conversation started. Should it be a bit more inclusive group? Should it be a bit more independent group? Whichever. So it's definitely your group, and it's your process, and we are really hoping for a bit more conversation this evening and see if we can land on some decisions here. So, and with that, I'd love to hand it over to you all.
Do you have a point of reference in terms of the topic?
Mother, wait for the microphone to get you. Thanks.
Do you have a point of preference in terms of discussion or topic points or discussion points? 1 through 5, I believe, or 6? That you want to address, or just open it up and take it and pick it, address the topic as we...
We're flexible. Just start wherever you feel comfortable.
Well, first of all, I think the appointment by the mayor, I don't think that should happen. I think that should come from within us, especially the neighborhoods, the community. I think the community should really be able to pick and identify who they want in that authority. Right? Because to me, this is unique and dynamic in terms of the different 200 boards or whatever the mayor has that you sign up for, and you're trying to, you're trying to get on and let the mayor, choose whoever he wants, which is fine and dandy. But right now, we're asked to fund this thing. We as residents and the residents, the citizens of the state of Colorado are asked to vote to fund this thing. Yet, when it comes time to have voices or input, sure, we're on the advisory. We're not on the policy side. So that makes a big difference. When you talk about working groups, those working groups are just, and that's what it is. It's just a working group. You don't set policy. You just make a recommendation. It's not policy being sent or being established by the residents here. And my point is that, again, this is a unique and dynamic situation in terms of the funding, where it's coming from. It's coming from the residents of the state of Colorado. Yet, when it comes down to identify the people who get to express thoughts in terms of where that funding goes, the residents aren't represented there. The mayor appoints those people, those 3 individuals. So I think that needs to be, to me, that's one of the most critical things. I'll leave it at that, and I think Drew had some comments on that as well.
Thanks, Armando, putting me on the spot.
That's what happens when you don't come 2 to 3 times, Drew.
Yeah, I think, I agree with Armando. The mayor appointing our representative is really problematic. But I think that is embedded in the rules, the way the authority is set up, so changing that might be difficult. But it really, John's not here to represent.
John is here.
Oh, John? Is that, John, I'm sorry. You're so quiet. John, with all due respect to John, I think the mayor, much great respect for John, I think it is problematic the way when the mayor chooses our representative. But I also do think that the CAC is not really representing the community, and part of that probably is my own fault, that I haven't tried hard enough, or maybe made as good an effort. So I think, we do have some people from some other members of the community here that I hope that will speak up, that may be more representative. So I think there's a real problem with the representation of the community to the National Western. I think that there's really, and if this is the only mechanism or vehicle for that, I think that we do need to find another way. And I think the central problem is going forward, I mean, this, when the $800 million roughly was voted on and approved to fund the first two phases of the National Western, there were a lot of promises made to GES. And as yet, and I'm kind of just speaking for myself, I don't see much benefit in real terms that the community is really getting. And I don't know how we get there. I guess I might sort of illustrate that with, I had a coffee with Barb Frummel, who's also not here, but and she talked about how the 1909 arena was supposed to be this big benefit for the community, and I think that's the one thing that's supposed to be for the community. But there just seems to be I don't know if it's a lack of dialogue or people talking past one another, but how can we say, oh, this is for the community, and yet a lot of the communities feels that it's not serving them. There's just a disconnect here, and that the CAC somehow has to be maybe reformed or something. But I think those are kind of the problems I perceive.
Just a quick note about the appointments to the authority, and Brad, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the appointment authority is embedded in the ordinance that creates the authority, as well as the framework agreement. So I think generally you're correct about, or I share your sentiment, but one of the issues that came up several years ago when the authority was created was that unlike other neighborhood organizations, CAC is not an RNO, which made it hard to have a set representative from the CAC, so it had to be drafted that way, as I remember from the conversations with the city attorney's office from way back in the day. But I understand your sentiment and would share that.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that I don't think that is, I don't know. And I don't know how you have a community select a representative. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Well, I do think part of the way that it works is anyone can nominate someone to the mayor's office for that position. And depending on how many nominations a person gets, I mean, the mayor may be more inclined to select a person who gets a lot of votes from the community. A lot of nominations. Well, we don't know what the mayor's mind
Well, you
is.
just elect. Well, part of that process, so I'm telling you first time. And I'll give you an example in terms of participation. I think it was last month. We reached out, being Nikki Zeppelin, myself, and the principal at principal at Garden Place, and there was another attorney that volunteers at the school. We reached out to re-engage the issue, Colorado State University, with Garden Place Elementary School in terms of bringing in some new, innovative, creative, forward-thinking, some visionary academic curriculum to the school regarding livestock, and some positive things came out of that. And I think those are the types of things that the CAC should be developing, not only with the schools academically, but for the businesses, how everything could be integrated. Because we're here, this is the way I look at it. The front range skiers, they support the mountains in terms of skiing and all that stuff. We as residents support the National Western Stock Show. And all we're saying is that we want to be more engaged and be able to bring all of our input and fruition, so we become part of the process, and not just from an advisory standpoint, but from a policy standpoint. Because right now, all we do is just share thoughts and concepts, it's fine. But none of it gets formed into policy. And it's really cool. Brad and Paul, you guys, I mean, everybody here, they're cool and dynamic. That's as far as it goes, And I think they need to go one step further, and I think it would be more meaningful if the selection process was from the community instead of being appointed from the mayor. I think the more residents would get behind every effort to elevate the National Western Stock Show and support it in every way, more so than it is right now. And that's all we're trying to do, is just support what's currently going on. That's my own personal perspective.
After Ann, I think we have Brad wants to make comment and then AE, so go ahead, Ann.
Well, just in terms of
No, just pretend that it works.
the
Actually, it's working. It was.
Try this one.
It's making noise like it works.
Sibilance. Anyone know that movie? Sibilance. The way the process works now, and I don't think that it couldn't be changed. I don't know if it's in the framework agreement or it's in our bylaws. Our bylaws are, I believe, more easily changed than the framework agreement. But the way it works right now is anyone can apply to boards and commissions. You don't have to be nominated somebody else. You can nominate yourself. You can apply for that. And then the mayor's office of boards and commissions then presents a slate to the mayor and they make a selection. I will tell you that we actually have a hard time getting folks to submit nominations. And I'll tell you, we work really, really hard to get the word out for applications for the board. So that I'd love that to be a more sought after role. That said, I don't know that it would be impossible to do that. I'm happy to research this and come back to the group to find out if something could be changed that would allow the committee to decide or whatever.
Brad, can we make the decision maker though? Like you, maybe you and Paul and one of the members instead of the mayor. That's what my point is. Don't let the mayor make the decision. Make the people who work here. You, Paul, and one of the residents here. You guys make the decision instead of the mayor. You guys call the shots.
Yeah, and I think that the mayor's office would be very open to strong advice on selections. That's been my experience. So, but I think we can ask that question and look into it. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule that we can't recommend be changed. Be my thought.
Thank you.
I'll just walk around and take the mic.
So some of my thoughts are that I think I was one of the ones who thought that the authority in the city should be the facilitator at this point in time. And I'm not just saying the authority, I'm including the city because in my opinion, we have been very inwardly focused for the National Western. Necessarily so, as you know, the master plan was completed and we've been getting updates on construction. But I think now the focus needs to go outwardly. And so I think not including the city, when the city I think has still very large responsibility for the impacts to the community from the National Western. The city really wanted the National Western, and so now there's impacts to the neighborhoods, and we need to work with the city to help solve some of those impacts and take advantage of some of the opportunities. So to me, I think the focus needs to be outwardly, and so it should be both the authority and the city that are facilitating. That's my opinion, and obviously I think we do need some very strong goals formed, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend, to name them right now, but it can't just be a presentation style anymore. The presentation style served us as we learned more about the construction and we understood the schedule and all of that, but now it needs to be more of a dynamic process for sure. So those are my thoughts on it. So anyway, that's all I'll say.
Go ahead and do no. Go ahead and do no.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my first question might be for you, Tom. So I'm wondering if people outside the current CAC members were surveyed?
No, may I answer that? No, we started with the CAC because this has been a group that's been so actively engaged, and as we are looking into transition, we thought this should be the group we start with. That is not to say that there is a question, should the broader community be brought in and how so? So essentially the decision will be back at the CAC to decide how that process works. But we are starting with CAC.
But there will be a larger...
Absolutely, I hope so. I mean, again, what the group decides, I'm not the one to decide. We certainly do hope so, that there will be a much larger, at least that's what we've seen in the comments coming back. that there is a desire of this group to engage a much broader community in these decisions.
Okay, and then one other clarification. For the first one, were these options that were multiple choice, like choose one of these, or people wrote those things in? Okay.
People express their thoughts on that.
Because I would add another option, which is a combination of potentially independent and authority and city, that maybe there's a shared, or they're rotating of who creates the agenda, or something like that could be another possibility. Just wanted to put out there. And my other comment would be just, I think it's really important to talk to folks outside of this group, because it does seem like we're not only talking about the future of the CAC, but the future of community engagement and, the relationship between the authority and which, the city's very involved in, and the neighborhood. And I think that's really important to think bigger than just the CAC potentially, and definitely get feedback from folks that haven't been involved in this.
No, I mean, most definitely that has been some of the comments that we are getting, but again, whatever the group decides, I mean, there always has to be a starting point somewhere, right? So starting with CAC and hoping it gets to a much broader community from there, so.
I'm going to try and connect some dots with some of the comments people have said, but I want to say that I don't feel like we should be, I would rather think expansion and contraction rather than there needs to be a starting point somewhere. I'm feeling a little bit out of context with this process, and I'd like to suggest that we get clear about where we're being led. I myself feel like I'm left in a void to receive a statistical summary of phrases. I talked to a few folks in the neighborhood and here, and I was really hoping and would like to have access with the permission of the folks, with the narratives, with the comments, with the deeper thinking. I feel like this is a loss. I genuinely thought, I had hoped, and I had hoped that we would have a round table where people who had contributed could let us know, the depth of what they're saying. And I appreciate folks that are saying that, you're giving your specific thoughts and we can talk with each other. I'm very uncomfortable with trying to come to a parsed out set of linear decisions like this, and I think it loses the analytics around what has this process been. And so I would ask that we look at, if we're being subtly told that we have to make a decision, and if we have a November-December joint meeting before the end of this year, then I feel like we're really betraying the process. I would say at the earliest, to have in-depth conversation and to broaden it, let's talk about February, having some concrete, and I'd like to get the narrative thoughts out. I also want to tell the group, I intentionally withheld my thoughts because after the last meetings, because I wanted to see what was here kind of without me, frankly, because after the last meeting I had a deja vu experience where several people said to me, "Oh, I really appreciate what you said, and you said it so well. I was going to say the same thing, but I didn't, and I hate being in that position." And I want to know, so I'm going to look for things that I can, that I can resonate with, or if there's things that aren't said. I do want to put back on the table one thing that I just put out on the table last meeting, which is I feel that it would be very to the benefit. I would like to see an authority, an advisory board, not an advisory committee. This is a whole different concept. And I would like it to be, and that's a discussion that takes some depth. I feel like there's also different entities and different types of organizations that should be being considered with the Community Investment Fund. We need to open up that conversation. As far as changing the framework agreement, I absolutely feel it's legitimate to change the framework agreement. I supported and testified myself in support of the framework agreement and spoke in terms of specifically how our United States Constitution got okayed with the agreement of some of the colonies, so to speak, saying, well, we'll do that as long as there's a convention and we get to pass the Bill of Rights right away. That is an imperfect framework agreement we had to bring up. that that there was a problem with the representation because the constituency in the neighborhoods was not given to, and there was a mechanism like the other partners. There was not two representatives originally in that framework agreement, and the mechanism for if one of the two that was appointed, say for CSU or one of the other partners, was unable to perform their duties any longer, then that remaining person would have 2 votes for CSU. That was an inequity that was built into the original framework. When that was brought up, and I brought it up, I stipulated, I know exactly where it was, and I put it out without proposing a solution to see what the city would propose. And what the city team proposed was, let's do a non-voting alternate, because if we have to go back to all of the partners, it's going to be months and months of legal discussions, which is true. On that basis, I felt that I could vote to support the framework agreement because the door was open, an acknowledgement that there needed to be a more weighted participatory constituency from the neighborhoods. And I feel like this is a discussion that should be had, and it could be very constructive. I want to say that I don't feel that this, the term that this has been more of a presentation style that you're talking about, Ann, I have been very disappointed at the proportion of presentation style type. I do not feel that that was the original intent, nor was that what was happening when we were working on the master plan. That was a very engaged. I think some people will remember some of the meetings of the master plan, the engagement, some of them over at Taxi, and some of the conversations we had when Parsons Brinkerhoff was hired originally. Somebody else can say what their role was. I can't remember the title of their task. There was an open discussion about what do we want to see in the RFP? How do we want to, as a group, impact the sensitivity of community impact values in that RFP from the very beginning? Those are engagement impacts. Those are things that are not just, but I agree that there's been a lot of presentation. It's kind of like, we just have to kind of, briefing type stuff. I originally thought that the partners' reports would be more along the lines of how are we creating, how is the synergy of all the partnership, informing the authority and engaging the broader neighborhoods and communities, that sort of thing. So I think there's something to discuss there. I also want to say that originally, regarding the RNO, I remember the discussion around some of the RNO, the discussion, well, who would sign an agreement and questions like that coming up. And I honestly don't remember that when the decision was made to, the CAC engaged with the appointment of the GES representatives to the board of directors, to the authority board, the voting and the non-voting. There was actually a somewhat engaged process where those folks that were interested in being on that board were talking to each other, with each other, that people came, that there was, as I recall, there was a requirement that each person have some references. I don't feel that what it was that there was whoever got the most votes, just kind of as for incidental engagement. But I think that there can be and ought to be a public process where people that, I would love to be in a roundtable conversation with people that have nominated themselves to be on the authority board, or if we can set up an advisory board. I would love for us to be talking with each other more about this. And then lastly, I agree that in regarding the accountability of what is the breadth of engagement and the depth of engagement within the neighborhoods with the CAC, I think each and every one of us needs, whoever we are, and I'm saying this absolutely with myself at the heart of my own accountability, each and every one of us, I feel, do have to look and assess what have we done or not done to be broadly inclusive of our efforts to get to know one another within our neighborhoods in order to help there be entry points into something like the CAC. I have honestly been as critical as some of the neighborhood organizations and people that I really feel I would support the voice and that I want to have support of their voice in this engagement as I have with strategies of people in the city and on projects engaging with one another. It is a mutual decision. And in that context, I want to say to this group regarding this 2E election, I have decided how I'm going to vote on the 2E funding. I have also decided that I am not going to discuss my vote with anyone of my peers or anyone involved with anything, but I'm going to lead people, I'm going to, lead is a too strong word, I'm going to encourage people to go to the source and discuss this. And I'm going back to many of the doors that I went to. I had 3,000 contacts during the 2C election. And I want to see how, without influencing people's votes, if I go to people and I say, engage with this issue, learn what this is. I know, because I kept the contacts, who I talked to during that election. I'm saying to people, did you pick up it? Did you become engaged? Why didn't you? And I'm saying to people, this conversation, how it goes, not just the vote, how this conversation goes is going to determine a great deal about what this project is. Hugely. I do not want to be part of influencing the vote this time because I'm very disturbed about what this process has been. And don't anybody assume how I vote, but I will disclose how I vote. But I am driving people into the conversation as best I can because there has been a massive disconnect. I totally agree. There's a lot of communications. I think there are benefits that have flowed to the neighborhood, and there are betrayals that have happened, and there are missed opportunities. And there's a deep analysis necessary because in the beginning, the concept was that this has never been done before. We're doing something very unique. And in my sense of what unique means is it's got to be institutionally unique. It's got to be strategically unique. It's got to be, entrepreneurially unique, educationally unique, and it's got to be organizationally unique. And I'm not seeing that, and I'm not seeing it discussed in a cohesive way. And that doesn't mean that it negates some of the extraordinary things that are emerging. But what the best could be, and what the great example is, and what the major impacts that are the most imperatives are not, in my estimation, showing up in the best possible way. And I do not feel that the conversation in the discussion is one that is safe for a lot of different types of thinking that could become part of this. And we all have to we need more entry points. And so when we're talking about this, I would like there to be a compendium of the discussions. I welcome what people have wanted to talk to me about that is in depth and comprehensive. I'm unsatisfied and unnourished by this type of a summary, and I don't want to lead this process to be led into this type of a parsed out, minutia set of discussions. So I'm asking for the timeline to be assured to be that we're at least meeting after the first of the year, especially if we condense November and December. I'm asking for an authority board, which is a whole examination, an authority board to be discussed as a an advisory board. We have an authority board. An advisory board, there's a whole set of possibilities with that. So at this point, and I absolutely intend to have more substantive documented feedback into this, but I'd like to be more in the context of knowing what everybody else is fitting together on it.
Sorry, Jesse, can I just comment on that and then, first and foremost, the folks who have submitted responses, are you comfortable with me sharing your full responses? I did not feel that I had liberty to decide that, so I essentially summarized that. So you can email me and let me know. You don't have to decide that right now. Or, to his point, if you want to engage into a further conversation here, I just did not feel I needed to share. I felt I'd be breaking somebody's trust by doing that.
Slavika, so that we're not dealing in absolutes, because I think absolutes get us absolutely nowhere. What I feel is that there is content, whether people want their names attached or not. I've talked to some of the people about some of the thoughts that they've had. There is content that has insight in the narrative. And it also, some of the content poses questions that are not here.
Agreed.
Okay, that's very important. And if you knew it, and if you recognize it, a good reason not to this be the focus point of the conversation. This is for depth. This is for depth. So it's okay with me if people don't want their whole thing, but I think that there is narrative. There's some narrative in the master plan that people brought in from their different directions that's brilliant. I want that. I want the project to have that, and I want the discussion to have that, and I want us to be able to carry that out into the neighborhoods and among the constituency and bring things back with that type of comprehensiveness.
Agreed. And this is really your guys' discussion. This is just a guide, but you can take it wherever you want to take it from here. So, Jim?
So I would just add that I agree that we need to take enough time to make sure that we we're in agreement in terms of the purpose of this CAC or whatever it evolves into, but that we're all clear in terms of the purpose and what level of authority and that this body will have. So I think that's going to be really important to clarify. In my response in the questionnaire was I talked about, I think I mentioned a couple of times, the importance of the community benefits agreement being part of this discussion and being on the agenda. So I want to make sure that that's noted.
Anyone else? John?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation here. But I want to point out a couple of things that we are at a point as a group where we're either going to sink or swim. And I'm not for sinking. And hopefully I have enough confidence in our past relationships here that neither anyone here at this table wants to sink. I appreciate all the comments made. I think that we need to face some issues of reality. This is a political situation, and there's a process that's linked to political. The mayor's going to make the appointments, whether we like it or not. End of conversation. That's not going to change, at least not in this administration. So we need to be flexible enough to live with that, work to change it, or try to adapt a process where we can have more input into that process. And that's not going to be done like the issues that were said here today. Wishful thinking hasn't got a goddamn thing done, at least in my lifetime. I've been hearing the term community input for the last 60, 70 years. And I've seen some terrible things happen in community discussions during the 60s and 70s. But the bright possibility is there's thriving institutions today that have survived those crises. And they've got above the bickering, the lack of communication, and they're being very effective. You know, the public radio and TV stations is a good example of how that came about. The healthcare system in this city came out of knives and gunfights, believe it or not, when the Black Panthers and the Crusade for Justice people were wrangling for power and control. But there was enough good people in that process that got through, and we have a pretty decent healthcare system, I believe. Nobody dies for lack of medical attention in the city of Denver. And I'm damn proud that I was part of that process. One of the things I think that's really important is that we all come together, whether we agree or not. And we're going to have to discoin the phrase community input and make it a meaningful process for gathering all the intelligence. There's a lot of it out in the neighborhoods, a lot of it. But it's being squandered by special interest groups, by people that want to pursue their own personal gains or their own personal projects. And there's enough savvy in this group just tonight, and we don't have a full group here. We have some successful business people sitting here tonight. And I'm very proud to have been associated with some of them. I need to say that in the past, I'm not so proud to have had the issues with some of the business interests in our neighborhood that were totally in a community interest. But those have been alleviated, or at least addressed. So, I again say, let's don't squander our success. We're at a point now where however we choose to do so, we need to step up to the level of and get beyond bickering over what we're going to do because we've done a hell of a lot to get here where we are today. So it's time that we shift gears. Let's sit in discussion, and I'd suggest that we engage in some meaningful discussion over the next couple of months, whether we come up with an independent group, whether we come up with part of whatever. Two things are not going to change. We need to deal with the city, and we need to deal with the framework that is set up in. And that's CSU, Nature and Science, and the National Western Stock Show, and the authority. That's not going to change in the immediate future. So we need to develop whatever is necessary. If we've got to wrangle with some of these people, we'll do it. It's not anything that anyone is going to hand to us. We got to go out and go after it. So we can do it. There's enough moxie at this table now, and it's not 100% full. We can do anything that we propose and are in agreement to do so. And that's why I persist in being here. I persist in encouraging all of you to stick with it. We can do it. As the old saying is, we're Mexicans, not Mexicans. So we can do it, and we can do it together. And I'm encouraged by the responses, but it's time that we all get together and get this thing done. Thank you.
Nola will be next, but I wanted to say a quick word. This month and last month, I was determined not to provide any substantive input other than to provide historical context. And I meant to tell this to Flavika today when I had a brief phone conversation with her. I'm committed to remain facilitator through this, whatever this transition period is, February, March, whatever. But I will lay my own cards on the line. As a board member of the Western Stock Show Association, I believe, as I think Drew and Ann and maybe Nola both said, the CAC's grown beyond just the stock show. And I think it's important that, the WSSA, and I think we do understand that, and that, our role be significantly diminished in whatever the CAC does. In terms of facilitation and things like that, because I believe that this should be much more community-driven, as opposed to having the Western Stock Show Association intimately involved in this process, which is one of the reasons I don't say much in the meetings other than just to keep us going along, so that we don't stay here until 9 p.m. at night, and I don't miss Grey's Anatomy. So I just, that's part of what I do. But the other thing for me, I've been doing this since the very beginning. Was it 2013, 2014, whatever year we started? It's been a long time. And granted, I'm a little tired. But anybody would be a little tired after doing something like this for so long. But on a more personal note, my life is transitioning as of next week in terms of how I work and what I do. I'm becoming a senior fellow at a think tank for voting and democracy, and the Washington Post has asked me to be a columnist, an opinion columnist of my time. I guess that was kind of a flex, but I'll take that. So my time is going to be greatly diminished, and so I have to really look at the things that I'm doing, and I'm still committed to this because I'm a kid from the hood, and so I'm always going to side with people. The folks who live in a neighborhood that's possibly being gentrified, is being gentrified, and try to fight against that, or at least make it fair, transparent, and equitable to the people who live in that neighborhood. And also, I'm still Corinne Carroll's son. I'm always going to be that kid whose mother never finished the 3rd grade, and I'm always going to fight for the people in the community in whatever way that is. So I have a vested interest in seeing the CAC continue in some way, shape, fashion, or form as a voice that that brings together people in GES and also advocates for people in GES. So that's all I wanted to say, but I'm at the will of whatever you all want to do. If you decide tonight, hey, we're going to figure this out without Slavica and Terrence or Maria, I'm good with that. But but I'm here for the transition and to make sure that we land this plane in a place where everybody feels good about landing the plane. Oh, no, I had something to say. Or that's probably a better mic. This one's crappy.
This one's not working.
I felt like it was working in my head.
It was.
Maybe I just
Just there.
I wanted to say, I listened to the last meeting, although I wasn't here. I did listen to it, and I heard some conversation about trust, and that that there is that lack of trust in the community. And I think we also have to think about, and we had a conversation with Brad and Lucia and Ernest from the Community Benefits Authority Subcommittee, and John, about how do we talk about what a reparative path would look like. And I think that's another piece that's really important that's not anywhere here, that we really need to talk about. Are we going to talk about at some point the harm that has been done by the stock show, through the history of this neighborhood? We lost 7 blocks of homes in Elyria. How do we both start by recognizing what has happened in the history? I mean, you said the historical context. Like, let's talk about all sides of that historical context, right? So that we can both recognize what's happened and start to resolve it. And we have to start with the harms before we can figure out what the solutions are. And so I think a lot of these things, I mean, I'm very interested in the phases 3 through 8, but not an advisory role, like it says here. Like, how do we include decision-making in these places? How do we actually make us all coming to the table here meaningful and worth our time? And so a lot of that has to do with actually having decisions and meaningful work to do, and not be constantly put in a reactive position where it doesn't feel good, but a position where we can both feel like things have been acknowledged and that we can move forward and be proactive. And just to mention, we need to financing needs to be talked about in the community as well. So that's a piece. It's a piece of phases 3 through 8, definitely. But overall, that should be, if there's financing decisions that are being made by the authority or the city, that needs to be discussed, not brought to the community, but discussed from the very beginning with the community.
Hey.
I feel like this is a substantive conversation, and I just want to say I don't feel at all like there's bickering in this room. I just want to sort of offer a little counterpoint. I feel that they're making I don't feel that I operate from the relativity that you're describing with due respect, John. That as long as the mayor's going to make the point is we just have to adapt, etc. That's not the focus to me. The focus to me is the conversation that sensitizes the process. We would not, Mayor Hancock issued an email directly endorsing and requiring that there be a community investment fund in that framework agreement directly as a result of the conversations and discussions that came out of the CAC. That was sensitizing the process without getting distracted by what is the final authority in the mayor's office. I want us to have that discussion. If it takes a year to change something in the framework, it does. But I think it's an absolutely critical conversation to have because it's going to go over several administrations, and that's how we get to know each other. We pose the question for each other out here, we discuss it, and I think that I consider it an absolute courageous adaptation to have the conversation and to have at least resolved something to lay a precedent that there's at least an alternate or a non-voting member to make a demonstration of a greater balance. So I want us all to continue to have the conversation, whether or not a particular mechanism changes. It is true, the reality in a document like the framework requires lawyers from every single one of the partners, massive discussions of language, terrible headaches and migraines, and all kinds of things that people in the city and in governments do that I'm just so glad I don't have the capability of doing. So in that sense, it is reality. But I really encourage us to put in the circle for us to talk about the concerns specifically. You know, should there be a better, because that will raise to a higher level the insistence that however the appointments are made, while we look at the process of the final approval, that there's more. And I think of it as neighborhood agreements. The single noun, the community, or community input per se, are very unsatisfying terms to me. Comprehensive neighborhood engagement is so critical. And it is speaking more in terms of aggregates of individuals from many different places within the neighborhoods, including everybody in the businesses. I like the idea of the restorative concept that Nola was talking about. I think that there is an important gap of understanding reality in a lot of directions that I've seen among everyone I've been engaged with, including myself, about what are the realities of vitalizing a city, what are the realities of creating opportunity. The three things that I found people wanted at their doors that brought 2C into Denver was that an educational institution was moving into the neighborhood like CSU, that jobs were going to be created, not just construction jobs, but long-term and all kinds of jobs, and that the land could be cleaned up, that there would be some resources coming in. Those were three very attractive things. I think what Armando's saying is absolutely on point with bringing the institutions like CSU directly back into the schools. When I was working on the 2C campaign, Swansea Elementary and Garden Place Academy were not words in the literature that was going into some of the statements. And I intentionally, in discussion with the people on the campaign, inserted that the benefits would flow to Swansea Elementary and Garden Place Academy and Bruce Randolph. These are proximity neighborhoods. This is in the promise of the election of the 2C. And I want to give one example of where I think that we need to have more of a discussion about how things are unfolding. I'm going to give a couple examples. One, CSU celebrated, and by the way, I love CSU and I'm glad CSU is here, so please understand, this is not bickering. This is, let's talk about this. When CSU announced, somebody else can give the figure, a large amount of money going into rural agriculture, initiatives into rural agriculture. The rural-urban divide is a part of the term d'arts with the project. My feeling was, I want more of a ground level initiative directly in the population with the educational institutions, not just what's happening. I think there's a whole other way to go about this that isn't being talked about, where the constituency of Denver is honored in a way that is, the whole mechanism was tripped by how this city voted. CSU wouldn't have their $250 million if 2C hadn't passed, and I think that there's a gravity that could be different, and it doesn't mean some things aren't being done that are effective and valuable and that are favorably impacting the life among youth particularly. But there are things that are just being missed, and we need to have more of a conversation about this strategically and openly, and I think there's some really great ideas out there. So I'm trying to figure out how a decision is made in what we're talking about here. I'm not in a sink or swim mentality at all. I feel like there's an inflection point going on here, but I feel like it doesn't feel like sink or swim to me. It feels like urgency of assessment, urgency of going deeper, and urgency of being sure that we hit all the piano keys when we're talking to each other. And I feel like part of it, that we are in it is a political world. I acknowledge that. I'm totally naive about a lot of those things. I don't want to be sophisticated in some of those arenas, but I think that we I would like for us to get specific. I would like for us to get specific about strategies. And I think that the context of having that discussion is an important part of what can this group accomplish going forward. And in my thinking, if there was, for example, an advisory board, which is something to be explored, that board would have and there's lots of ways to constitute that can embrace the principles of direct constituency engagement, and in some representative ways, and it's a discussion. But that, to me, would be a mechanism where it is policy in accountability in the sense that you can have formal board approved, board discussed, board research, board vetted. You can have decisions made that are recommendations to the authority in all forms of way that are trackable and that are an open process and that are related to fiduciary decisions and that are related to future strategic planning and that are related to some of the restorative things that can go on, because we have to get quantitative about what that is in order to be specific about a project going forward that would be, and I think that there are also ways that we haven't stipulated visibly what some of the benefits are that have been available. And I think that there are also issues that were put on the table, and later I can get more specific, and I'd like us all to, that were put on the table over the years that were not embodied by the National Western Center Citizens Authority or the Citizens Advisory Committee, and didn't become implemented, and there wasn't a mechanism to support the actual idea. I think that there's, for the group to put the CAC momentum on it by finding a way, and we did, and I think that it's important for us to, and each of us can do it with each other, and we can do it as a group. How come we haven't been more cohesive? And it doesn't mean that we're not together, if we're honest about the fact that there's been a variety of things that have prevented us from being able to be cohesive, going, as constituencies and as partner interests, that kind of a thing. These are things that I think will inform a successful next iteration of whatever happens. So, I want to say that I'm immensely concerned about having a process here and a conversation that moves this forward in a way that transforms the CAC into the next impactful element of this. And I also feel that it's not like there's going to be a list of answers, but I feel, and I appreciate that you would stick out the process. It's going forward, you're saying to facilitate it, however long it takes. I appreciate that, because I think some continuity is important as far as that goes. It's fine with me if you're sitting there writing your column during, if you want to double task, that's fine too, if you want to do that. But anyway, I just want to say that the more specific, and that's one of the reasons I know there's lots of specifics in the feedback that people were giving, and I think that the concept of technical assistance is extremely important in this process. There's amazing resources that can help with board development, that can help with all kinds of things. I have serious questions about doing nonprofit-based models. There are other ways to do this. I do not hear this being part of the conversation. I think that and I'm not just talking about the market, I'm talking about what we're looking at with the CIF, I'm talking about a lot of things. And then one last thing I want to say, that I had never felt that this was a group centered on the National Western Stock Show Association or the Stock Show. I am absolutely a little bit dizzy and disoriented to hear statements like, well, we've now grown beyond the Stock Show, we have to... The very concept of this was a partnered relationship between Colorado State University, the City of Denver, National Western Stock Show Association, and the founding partners as well in the discussions. And that was part of what I thought that our mission was and was to show how the magnetism of all of these partners together creates, the sum is greater than the parts, and it transforms it. And I don't feel myself, and this is my opinion, people may differ, and I'm certain, I don't feel that the National Western Stock Show Association has overpowered this group in terms of the facilitation. It's sponsored, it provided resources, but I never got the message from anybody that it was in the beginning that the part of the stock show's stated conviction was that the stock show has to go into another, I can't remember the exact words, but it had to do with the relationship between the stock show and this project and the neighborhoods. That was very important in the conversation. So I think that we may have fallen down as far as turning inward and missing that along the way, and it's come to feel that way. So something didn't sustain itself, basically.
And
So I have a suggestion, because I feel a lot of times in this group, the way that we're organized, we end up speaking to kind of like the people at the head of the table.
Oh, I was talking to everybody.
I know you were, but a lot of it is, in my opinion, it's not really community member to community member at this particular table right now. I believe a lot of it is speaking so that the people who seemingly make decisions can hear them. I know. So hear me out. So maybe it might be helpful if we have a next meeting without you guys.
That'd be beautiful.
It may be, if we could have a facilitator who is a neutral party, doesn't know us, doesn't care, maybe has like an agenda of things that we want to accomplish, decisions that we could, not necessarily that we have to make them all at the next meeting, but it might be helpful so that we're not all just like sitting here preaching about stuff. I'd like to have a facilitator who can help draw out what everyone's thinking, and that we just have time to brainstorm together a little bit more. I don't think that that's what this is. I don't feel this is brainstorming. I think people have a lot of opinions, they get to say them, but to me, brainstorming is when someone says, what do you think about this? And maybe 5 people give you that feedback. I mean, I hear you, A.E., I know what you're saying.
That's the expand and contract, and I support that.
Okay.
I'm with you 100% on that, and I value this, and I value what's going on here immensely, and I agree that that's a good next step, and I hope that I feel communicating is not necessarily preaching, and it's not necessarily generalities, because I want to know what people are thinking.
And I would like to have a meeting where we're not talking into this thing and being recorded.
I'm
Right.
personally toward that too.
So I don't know if we handed with each other and just talk and maybe invite a few other people here that we
Well,
feel.
yeah, and we can talk to each other even between the meetings too, which can happen.
I know.
We have did you have a comment? Susan and then John. I love
I think
Yeah, I love
this group might want to think about, I think that's exactly right. The neighbors in this group need to talk with each other, and they need to talk with the neighbors that aren't sitting at this table, and come to a consensus and say, well, yes, there should be community input to the National Western Board. And then talk about how many people, how they would be, and there's all sorts of things. And I think it would be really important to have a facilitator, and to also maybe reach out to some experts that could come in and say, if you decide you want to go forward, here's 4 models to consider. And the community talk about the pros and cons of those models. There's some real specifics to it, so we can start moving along. But I think that's probably where it needs to go. Yeah, because the question that hasn't been answered really is, does this group want to continue? And does it want to continue as just a community group or include all the partners? I mean, so I think we need to start having real conversations about the specifics.
Can I just ask, is there a deadline we're operating? I heard mention.
no, that was just AE.
Yeah.
Well, there was an implied, see if when I hear statements like, can we make some decisions tonight, or...
No.
And it's been an unanswered question, so I posed the question, and let's see how...
Yeah. So I just want to give an answer because it's a very fair and legit question, and my answer is exactly the same as Terence's. We are going to both be here as long as we need to be here and as long as we need to help you throughout this process. When I say decisions, the question that more implies what would you like to take this next. So I'm hearing one next step here, which is perhaps we should meet without Slavica and Terence and Brett here and Yuko's office and CSU. I don't know. So that is kind of, it's really up to you as to what the decisions you want to make moving forward. But as far as us being here and helping facilitate, We are in it as long as it takes. We're not just going to say, hey, bye. But yes, essentially, we all know that the transition will occur. When does it occur? I don't know. That's really up to you all to decide.
Yeah, I would agree, there's no schedule, and, but I would say that there is a season. And to me, the season is, you know, and I've said this before, that I understand a frustration and an impatience with what has been talked about, what the National Western Center and all of this was going to produce in terms of the capital B, little b benefits to the community, and we've been talking, it's been talked about for a long, long time. And I would agree that you said some things have happened. Most of it's been in the form of construction and horizontal things and some connectivity and things like that. But the stuff that really I think people are going to feel and that they really are interested in is coming. And I hate saying that too, because people have been saying that for a long time too. But my sense is that, you know, next Tuesday's a big day. That's a big day. You know, there is a momentum occurring, and there is a momentum on the west side of the tracks in phases 1 and 2. The Stockyards Event Center is about to be completed. The CSU facilities. I was just standing in the middle of Betty Cram an hour and a half ago. It brings tears to my eyes. I mean, it is breathtaking what is happening there in this place. It's starting. You can see it now, and what's going to happen over the next year or two is going to be staggering. And if we want to wring the potential out of that and make it the place that we all want it to be, it has to be completely of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I think over the next year or so, there are going to be a number of potential opportunities. Again, next Tuesday is a big day. What happens after that, you know, these future phases, the P3 didn't happen. The GEO bond was, you know, another approach to start to kickstart phases 3 through 8. There very much is commitment from the Hancock administration, I believe, to continue and get this project, you know, the foundation laid. I will tell you from the authority perspective and from mine, I am like dyed-in-the-wool committed to this campus and its mission and vision. It's more than just about a master plan. It's critically important to our city and our region and our communities. And so if we do, I think this conversation is at the core of what can be and could be and possibly should be, that may be too strong of a word, of how GES represents itself and participates on an equal footing with this and in this process. And we don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. I got to tell you, I don't have the answer, and I don't know that any one person has the answer. But we have all got to be committed to putting ourselves out there and to get scrappy about this and try to weave together. And I have referred to these communities in that way because in some ways GS has a lot of different pieces and parts and a lot of history around that. And but that's the magic. That's the beauty of this community. And so how do you bring that? How do you bring these different pieces together to come to some commonality or some consensus? But so I do think while there is no deadline, and use the word urgent, that's how it feels to me right now, because this is going to take time, and we have to start working on it, because the time that we're going to need it, if we don't, when that moment happens, it'll be too late. It'll be like, oh crap, we got to make decisions now. We don't have this group formed. So I hope, and I love your suggestion of meeting with us. If that helps create more authentic conversation and gets opinions out that are somehow being guarded, I absolutely think that's the right thing to do. But I also wanted to say out loud, there's nothing that anyone from this group or this community can say that's going to offend me unless you talk about my life.
Okay, I think we had John, then AE, and then Vernon, and then Armando. Huh?
Let Vern go, because he hasn't said it all night.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Well, I just want to say one thing. I think our markers should be included, like the history, natural science, that's all. Because I think even a lot of that will be
We have had conversations in reference to how we feel we should move forward. And I'm not going to talk any about what has happened. I'm trying to look at this whole situation as a forward-moving situation here. And, you know, I listened to AE, and, you know, she brought up this advisory board to be established. Me personally, I think it should be called the GCP Advisory Board, to represent the entire community.
GCP?
Yeah,
Website, I can help you.
well, not sorry, GCP. Well,
GS?
yeah, GES, I'm sorry.
No worries, I just thought maybe there was another,
But anyway, taking that forward, I'd like to, you know, see, I'm talking about taking first steps, okay? We can talk about all the stuff that's going to happen going forward, but yet, we have to take the first step, okay? We've discussed the issues of a community benefits agreement. Well, one of the things that I always got back is like, who's going to be the group or organization that would handle that? And we don't have that, okay? We've got seed money to begin to do things here that the community could have better control of. And the community should control that money because that's what it was put there for. Not the authority, not the government, not Denver. It should be the community that controls that. And in order for that to happen, we have to establish something that would control all that. And the inputs from that would come through the community, not through anyone else. And the people that should be on there, should it be people from this group, or should we dissolve this group and then let people make selections of who they'd like to see on this board? And so I think we have to think through that. But we can't do any of this other stuff out here until we reach a point where we get organized and together and put this whole thing together. And I think once we do that, then we would be able to clearly define, okay, our goals. We could have genuine representation of the community. And then, you know, and then we could get a community benefits agreement. And with the seed money that we're kind of talking about here, if we're in control of that, we can hire the technical support that we need, okay, to work for, and I'm saying us, but to work for the community, to reach the different goals that you need to reach. But none of this means anything until we take the first step. And so maybe we ought to focus specifically on trying to take this first step and put this group, whatever you want to call it, I'm just throwing some stuff out here, and take this first step and get an organization and get ourselves organized so that then we can take control over what the destiny is going to be.
What's next?
John, did you?
No,
Okay.
he hit the nail right on the head.
Okay, perfect. Then AE, and then did we have someone over here?
Was it Nola, did you have your hand
Did
up?
you? Okay.
I think that the beauty of a conversation like this is that it is constructive, insights emerge, and it is a working group, and the next step, the suggestions, which is a great word to have now, suggestions can become very specific, and something occurs to me, and I want to put it out for people to discuss, which is there's two things going on, and I think of this not as dissolving, but as I feel that we're incubating something here. And I feel more like there's a foundational way for us to be, whatever any of the involvement of any of us is going forward from here, I think that there's this important process of engagement in this discussion. But there's two things going on here. One is CRL's need to move out of the position of facilitating. And the other is this process that we're talking about that involves a lot. So why not separate the two? Why not consider the possibility of a transitional facilitative section that has nothing to do with saying, with utmost respect for what CRL has done, it takes the pressure off. Those are two separate, in a way, they're two separate things that are going on. So I think it might be worth looking at. But something's going on here, it's almost like it's breaking up, so I don't know if people need to stretch or what, so do we need to take a break or something?
I think we are almost at the time. I think that's what's going on.
But I think, because that's a very specific thing to discuss too, which is, could we separate the function, and one last thing, I'm not feeling anything, I think it would be interesting and could be valuable to not have facilities here, not have the authority here, but I don't feel at all like, I hope there's not inhibitions because of people being here from the project. That's part of the nature of the project, is for us to be talking as peers. And in the course of the CACs, if those of us that have been around for a long time will remember working groups, we'd have zoning discussion groups, we'd have master plan groups, we'd have supplemental, and I'm a little bit hesitant to negate the structure of the CAC as a formed body to do that. And I actually feel that I would rather have a level playing field conversation with all of the people involved, the partners for sure, and I'm fine with the authority staff being. I think that's part of gaining insight, and I think it's I'll be happy either way. I'll go either way. But I feel like there are things that were done, that there are things that were not done that I feel need to be talked about. When I hear you, Brad, say we don't know how to do it, and none of us know how to do it, and there's some truth to that, but there is a different strategic instinct among different people that are involved from different positions. And there has not, in my opinion, been, and in my experience, been the kind of conversation where the answers that we each have a part of can emerge to something that fully and wholesomely engages. My excitement has never been around what is being built physically. Because that can always be done beautifully. I feel like I want us to have on the agenda discussing the last 5 years since 2C passed. How could this have been a more enriching opportunity to engage the people in the neighborhoods and the constituencies in a way that was envisioned from the outset? Because we didn't have to wait for a lot of things for the buildings, and that's a legitimate consideration. If we want to presume to be setting the precedent for doing something different in the world, then let's keep that on the table and let's really dig into that. So part of the big picture. But I like the specific suggestion would be to evaluate, and I don't mind if the people that CRL has been participating with have participated continue with the conversation with institutional history, even if the facilitation isn't there.
Thank you for that, Eddie. No, you are absolutely right. We felt it was time for transitioning, and I think Paul addressed you all at the last meeting. But yes, those are two completely separate conversations, I agree. And as just Erin said, and I'm saying that too when I spoke to Maria before I came, we are more than happy to stay engaged in whichever way you want us engaged. So not abandon the process in any way, but if you'd like somebody different to help you get through this process, that's totally fine too. So, Nola, I think you had a comment?
Question for you to ask internally too. I'm asking you to think about it internally too, not just think about it.
Sure.
Maybe there are pros and cons.
Sure. I just wanted to mention about CBAs. I think community benefit agreement negotiation is very different from this group. It's a different dynamic, it's a different setup, and it has a very specific outcome of an agreement. But now the coalition's negotiated 2 community benefits agreements now, and both have a standing committee that then meets after the agreement to uphold the agreement. So it also outlines kind of the different areas that are ongoing, kind of being checked in on. So, if it's labor and health and wellness and local business and, but those different categories of the benefits then are sort of the ongoing agenda items and update items. So I think what the negotiation, maybe someone from this group should be part of the CBA negotiations, but I do see that as a separate function.
Did you have your hand up, Drew?
Yeah.
Sorry, Drew.
I think to Mola's point, the CBA is just one thing.
Yes.
And I think the problems that we're dealing with are so much larger. I mean, the history, as I've lived here 14 years, and I still can't believe some of the history of pollution, the contamination,
The lack of tree canopy, the quality of life, the lack of sidewalks, the historic issues in these neighborhoods. And oftentimes this committee, we were never allowed to talk about anything outside of the stock show. And whenever it would bubble up, whether it was I-70 or something, it's like, we can't talk about that. So we're dealing with these huge forces that are acting on these little communities of people that are mostly powerless. I mean, they're low income, they're minority communities that don't have a lot of power. And so maybe, Terrence, you have been very quiet, but maybe from your background you could talk about, help us out here. How do we deal with this? Because in many ways, the National Western just seems like another giant force, just like all of the huge developers that, the thousands of units that have been built over the last 5-7 years, not one single affordable unit. And people are being pushed out of their homes. So there's all kinds of threats to this community. Well, what does the development of the National Western have to do with that? Does it turn its back on it? Does it have anything to do with it? I mean, just for example, I might throw out, south of I-70, the triangle where the Coliseum is, the Coliseum parking lot, that's all city-owned land. And we come out with the P3 option, which was a slap in the face, selling city property we own to a private developer so you can finance the triangle. What does the community get out of that? Offering things that are just tone deaf, like that. I mean, we've got to listen to the community more. And I don't feel that we do. I mean, I don't feel like I'm a good representative. And I think we've got to listen to the community more. And this whole promise about, I think that Vern meant, like authentic community input, I don't think we really get it, but we need it. And it's always been very difficult to try to figure out what the community wants. And because of the incoherence in these communities, we're just very disorganized, people fight among themselves. But I've always found out at every level, whether it was CDOT with I-70 or the city with development, or even with the National Western, you pick the representatives of the community that you want that will further your agenda. And you call that the community voice. And so we have to be careful here when we decide who is the community voice, who's speaking for it.
So I think in some way this group needs to be reformed, maybe scrapped and started over to really represent the community. And instead of just having a seat beside the other institutions that all have a role to play. But the community, the relationship, as far as I've seen, it's really kind of medieval. There might as well be walls, and we got to figure out how to get around that. How do we offer something to the community? How do we do that? What does the community get? 2C made these promises, but honest to God, I can't really, even though I've been sitting here for, 5, 7 years, I can't really say that what the community has got has received out of this or what it's going to get. I mean, the new arena, I can't really say what does the community get out of that. There was supposed to be things that the 1909 arena was refurbished and that was supposed to offer things for the community, but I don't think it's been done authentically, and the community's not really buying it. So that's a big problem, and I don't know how to solve it, but without addressing how to address the community's needs, we're kind of just a bunch of people full of hot air, really.
Well, Drew, I would say this to your comment, okay? What happens here is we got to take control of it, okay? We need to take control over what our destiny is going to be. Okay, most any person that's sitting here that's been successful, okay, they took control over the destiny. And what we have to do as a community is take control over it. And taking control means it starts out small, but we reach a point where we have the power to say, this is what we need, and this is how we're going to get it.
But who does that, Vern?
We don't have to right now.
When we say
We have community members now, but that's not even happening.
All right, perfect example of this, we're dealing with this whole marijuana situation, all right? All right, and it was a disaster, the last hearing that we had, and they extended it. All right, so what Global Civic Partners did is we pulled our money, and now we've hired our own attorneys to represent what the community in their petitions have already said that they don't want. And so we know we can't beat these guys on our own. So we hired attorneys, and we're bringing the attorneys in. And I think it's on the 6th or the 5th. I can't remember what date the next hearing is. So we're going to have legal representation so that we can have a stronger force to explain to these people why we don't want a marijuana place on every corner of our neighborhood. So these are the ways that you begin to take control. You got to dig deep. Sometimes you got to dig in your pocket. Sometimes you got to put yourself out there. And that's what we have to do. And if we do it as a group, we can really accomplish things. But if we ask for it from the city, how many years have we been asking for it? Okay, it's time for us to take control of what's going on here.
Any other comments? It's coming up to 7:15. I want to make sure we get to partner updates before it gets too late.
Do we want to talk about how to structure the next meeting?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, I was going to get to that as well.
Okay.
Okay, since no one has doesn't look like anyone has any comments, I'd like to drive us to a decision point on having someone other than us up here facilitate. Is that something that you want us to move ahead with and suggest some names or work with? I don't know how we're going to do this because I don't think any of us want to make the decision who your facilitator is for you, or have Salica work with some subgroup of people to identify facilitators, or people recommend facilitators. But it looks like everyone wants to go ahead with the meeting without.
Nola.
No,
Nola's name's been thrown out there, apparently.
Oh, you're recommending Nola as a facilitator? Okay.
I don't know if I'm outside enough.
Probably need someone with a little bit more distance, although I think Nola, from what I've heard, would be good, but we need someone who's probably been separate from the process to date. I have a twin brother, his name is Clarence. He looks remarkably like me. Just kidding. I was going to suggest him. But Susan?
I was gonna say, her name's escaping me, her last name's Suarez. No. She's a Spanish speaker.
There's drama from CDOT.
No.
Okay, that one's off the table.
I like her.
That one's clearly off the table. Well, we don't have to make a decision right now on time, date, place, and facilitator, but we understand that that's how you want to move forward, and so we'll provide whatever technical assistance or support that's needed to make that happen going forward. And I guess not Nola. I keep calling you Nola because Nola's here, and it's just really messing with my head right now. I'm all in my feelings about it. Maybe because we had a therapy dog comes out of the office today. I'm feeling really good.
I just want to neutralize my no in a way. There's a facilitator that's been involved in many good meetings, in many aspects of what's going on in the neighborhood. There's a lot of baggage with that. And there's been a lot of semi-successful facilitation by a lot of groups and a lot of individuals over the last number of years. And I really think it would be important, and I myself am not too worried about the facilitation if the goal is brainstorming. There's a way to do brainstorming. I think I don't even mind if there was somebody on the authority staff that had facilitation skills. This is me speaking here now. Because there's insights, and if we can make it a true, look at what a brainstorming session is, study up on it, see who can do that. You know.
How about the 3 board members appointed by the mayor? That's what they're supposed to do. John and the other 2. Bring them to the table.
I think it's hard for people who are involved in the conversation, also facilitating.
Somebody recommended Civic Canopy, Bill Fulton. Does he have any bad? Bill Fulton with the Civic Canopy. That's what they do. They facilitate a lot of meetings. I don't know if any of you would engage with the group before. Would that be perhaps a group?
Bill was involved here early on, like the first year or two, so he has some knowledge of what the
And I know him from my previous life, not the current one. So
It's like
I think Jim, you know them as well. I mean, is that perhaps someone you might be interested in?
I would say endorse the possibility if he'd be receptive to any members of this group being reasonable.
Right.
Talking to him about, what they would like to see as a brainstorming session, to get maybe sensitized a little bit to what the situation is. I hope I haven't invited 20 people to talk to him, but somehow, let's temper the process a little bit. It's always a step that is often not taken when people hire as facilitators and bring them in.
Yes, Susan.
I was gonna say, why don't we just, everybody think about it, and then we could get you recommendations. You could send out a list of 5 or 6 names and say, is anyone on this list offensive to you?
No, I'd be more than happy to do that. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that. So,
But we already know one name not to put out there.
okay, so we know one name not to put. So, so does this group want to meet in November? Let's just start with that first. To continue the conversation with facilitator on your own. Do you feel you want to chat to one another? I mean, which way? What do you think would be the best? December, I want to talk to you guys about party. That's really what I want to get to before this meeting ends. But I just want to check about November. Again, both of us are more than happy and committed to continue, be here, meet you at the same time. Maybe not on Thanksgiving, but either a week before or after. But just wanted to see, there is a lot to unpack here, a lot. And I'm going to throw in my opinion. Drew, you were talking about a much broader issues that are neighborhood-wide, that are community-wide. So there is that. We have National Western as a, is it center or a campus, Brett? Please correct me. I think it's both, right? Yeah, it's both. Right? So that's a whole other discussion. So there is a whole role of that. And what is essentially this campus, I mean, what is the role of all of it? There is so much to unpack here. Some of it is directly related to projects. Some of it, I feel, what's coming up is much broader than just this project. How does GS as a neighborhood, as a community, as individuals come together, united on whatever the issue is? So there is so much to unpack here, at least from what I've heard tonight. Way beyond should CRL continue facilitating this or not. So much that's happening here in this room. So where would you all like to take it from here? You want to think through it? Do you want to meet next month with independent facilitator or just on your own? And naturally there is always somebody in group that will just step up and perhaps lead the conversation. We are up here totally okay, whichever way you'd like to continue. Here to assist, here to step aside.
I propose a December meeting with an agenda having to do with planning a January meeting and then a party.
Okay.
Remember that in January,
Because Thanksgiving is on the 25th.
Yes.
Remember in January, there won't be any meeting space here.
Correct.
Because we,
Yeah.
okay.
What about the authority? Why can't
Okay.
we meet the week earlier, like on the 18th?
We can. I mean, if that's what you all want, we certainly can.
Should make a reference to November.
November 18th.
To keep this energy going.
Sure.
Keep the discussion going.
So,
That's fine.
is that fine? So let's say if we meet that week, would you like to meet on your own? And Jesse and I can check if this room is available for you all to meet. Do you want us to suggest some independent facilitators? Yes? Okay.
Bring the list of facilitators to the next meeting. I would love to talk to the group about how do you do a brainstorming session so we really, I don't want to talk, I mean, I would like us to define that because it can be very dynamic.
Yeah.
Remember, I think a facilitator helps with.
Right.
Nobody,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It keeps it interesting.
Okay, do you want us to check this room, and if it's not available with the authorities' offices, does it matter, either one of those two spaces? Brett's office? Okay, okay, I like that. Okay, I'll send an invite tomorrow to this whole group, and do you want to broaden the group, or do you want to meet as a group as you are for that meeting?
I think we should be open to someone.
Open if somebody wants to come. Okay, perfect, perfect,
It needs to be.
perfect,
Especially the partners, right?
perfect. I feel,
Listen, I hope we all meet again.
Yeah,
And discuss the next facilitation.
yeah. So I feel like we have at least one next step for the next meeting. Good, everybody feel good about that? Okay. And December 8th, we would like to have a holiday party, so please put that on your calendars. Brad said he's going to perform some new dance moves that he's just looking at me like, please don't. Any recommendation on where would you like to have that party? Some restaurants, some galleries, some whatever. Okay, anywhere. If anybody has any recommendations, or where shall we celebrate the accomplishments and just each other and just get together as a community in December, let me know. But December 8th is the date we are looking
I
at.
know a really nice Cajun restaurant in New Orleans.
In New Orleans? I might say let's do
No, New Orleans.
New Orleans. I'm sorry, it's this accent, I'm trying.
No, it's not the accent. A lot of people do it.
Can I just say NOLA?
New Orleans.
Okay.
I thought it was Nolans.
December
It is-
8th?
it is-
December 8th,
In the evening?
in the evening,
Okay.
like probably the same time as the time of the meeting, 5:36. Okay? Let me know, other than flying to NOLA, if you have any suggestions as to where. Any other comments, anything from the partners at the table that you feel you'd like to share for tonight?
Can I just clarify? I'm not sure I understand. So So the consensus is to meet without the partners there and with facilitation. Did I, in November?
We want to include partners.
Okay, so everybody here, okay, all right, I just want to make sure I got the last form of that. I wasn't quite sure if he was just saying the one partner.
Anyhow, partners, do you guys have any updates for tonight? Anything you'd like to share? Yes.
So just quickly, we are, I mentioned this last month, we are about to, and I hope it's by Thanksgiving, posting an events operations manager position for the authority. This is a person that will help to manage events. Now, the authority won't be putting on events, at least the money-making ones. We will be coordinating and help to facilitate community events in spaces and on the campus. So that's what this person will be working on. We'll have more information in the next month or so. And we work really hard to get the word out there. We email the postings around here and to lots of other places and post it as many places as we can. So please, keep that in mind. If you know somebody who has those kind of skill sets, let them know to be looking for that. I mean, it's a cool spot.
Any other general, yes, Steve?
If I could just, sure. Sorry. I'll keep it fast. But Spur's opening our first building in January, as I think you probably all know at this point. So just a couple things I wanted to make sure was on the radar of all the people in this room. One, we're starting to open up opportunities for volunteers. So if you know people who are interested in animals and public engagement, things like that, who are educators, who just are interested, please let us know. We have that on our website. Also, we have bus scholarships. So as you're interacting with schools, if they are interested in coming to Spur and starting to plan those trips, we do have scholarships available. We also, for this last spring, had 4 students from 80216 receive the CSU Spur scholarships, those $10,000 scholarships. They're incredible students. They're all enrolled as freshmen up in Fort Collins. And we are going to be doing a selection for the spring semester too. So if you know any students who deferred just due to COVID, I know a lot of students did do that. We will be selecting soon for the spring semester. So if students are interested in enrolling for the spring, please let them know that scholarship exists. It's $10,000 to be used at CSU Fort Collins, CSU Pueblo, or CSU Global. So kind of whatever fits for them. And I think the last thing I just wanted to say is just in January, I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what you'll see when you come to Spur. So the Vita building is the first one that's opening. During the stock show, we'll be open from 9 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. every day. And that's pretty similar to what our hours will be normally year-round. But you'll be able to see surgeries, dogs and cats in surgeries, the Dumb Friendly Clinic. That will be a community clinic after the stock show. It's a little logistically challenging during the stock show, so there won't be community animals. But in the future, that's going to be a resource for the community to bring their animals for care. And then also you'll be able to see horses through the Temple Grandin Equine Center, assisting with human therapies, and see horses walking on submerged treadmills and receiving acupuncture.
Seahorses? You have seahorses?
Yeah, good point. Watch horses? There we go. I had to change my underwater treadmill thing because everyone thought the horses were drowning. So submerged treadmills. And then we have exhibits, educational exhibits that are in English and in Spanish. And then we also have QR codes that will connect you to other languages. So I just wanted to give you all a little taste of what you'll see because I think as we start to really think through what these buildings will be, it gets a little bit more exciting. So we're also planning to do a community sneak peek, and we're currently asking for feedback. So if you go to our website, it pops up immediately and asks you to fill out a survey. And if you have thoughts, right now it looks like people are, we've received I think close to 40 responses, and people are asking for an evening event. And it'll be the first event we host, so probably January 6th. So if you want to tentatively hold the date, but also just send it out if you know people who might have insight that would like to share it. We'd love to hear from them. So thanks.
And by the way, for those of you who don't know, Tiana's recently married.
Yeah. just got back.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
I have a
Thanks,
question
everybody.
for CSU. I'll just
Yes.
ask because we're almost out of time. When I read the review and I saw that you were looking for volunteers, highly honorable, you know. However, I would rather, on behalf of the constituents in the neighborhood, I would rather that CSUs innovatively propose an apprenticeship track for all ages where you're identifying jobs that are going to become real jobs and that you invite people to get the advanced training by engaging with what you're doing. I really would like to see a different model. And I'm kind of hoping that that discussion, which has occurred in some ways over the years, can come back to the table. Because the idea of jobs over time and the professionals and the sciences and all that is always part of it. But there was always an element of how do we bring the broad base of the economic benefits right into the neighborhood. So there's lots of, I'm happy to suggest some mechanisms, and I think other people can too.
I think that's a great point. And we have, right now, we have paid internships that are available, and we're hoping that we can expand out
And
that
I'm
apprenticeship and internship
Like for
compensated
future
track.
conversation, and I'll because we're out of time, yay for internships, this is a whole different thing.
I hear you.
And I don't want to default, scholarships and internships are great, but there is a different economic base to centering a population in an awareness of the evolving roles in an economy at all levels. And there's a lot of
I hear
foundation
you.
to do
Yeah,
that.
and as we open up, there's a lot of opportunity, and we've been talking about that, so I'd love to continue that
Yeah,
conversation.
you being prepared for it is having this conversation.
Sounds good.
Tina, do you have anything?
My updates are all written down. So you all,
On our website.
if questions, reach out. I think the only thing is we have scholarships available for break camps, and just a reminder, it's always free for school groups to come to the museum. And so as we're thinking about schools in the neighborhood, we also have bus built-in support, and we go out to schools too. So
If I'm homeschooling myself, can I bring myself to the museum for free?
you're welcome anytime, so just let me know. And we have sloths at the museum right now. That's the big news, a live sloth.
Oh, cool.
And it's free with admission, so come check it out.
So the mayor's office?
Sure. I was just going to give a construction update, but I think Brad so eloquently described what you can see out there when you go that I think that would be redundant. So I'll just say that we're really focused on connectivity with the roadways, with the pedestrian environments. We've got street trees and street lights and benches. It really does feel like a place. And that we are making good progress on the 51st Street Bridge. We have piers going into the ground. We expect to have all those done by the time the water comes back up in the spring. So we're very, very excited that bridge is going in. And it's a huge, huge connective piece back to the neighborhood.
So when will the bridge be usable?
Right now, we're looking, it depends on weather, on the spring flows and how fast that water comes up. But in general, we're looking at summer to fall of next year.
That's major.
Yes, it's going to be huge. So.
And is all of Betty Cram going to be working?
It will be, yes, up to the Marion, or down to the Marion Underpass. That portion won't be complete until whatever happens on the other side. But yes, up from 46, up National Western Drive, Betty Cram, and then it's hard without a map to point at. But then National Western Drive along the river all the way up to Race Court.
Oh, okay, because that's new connectivity.
Yes.
It's something we had always, back to the neighborhood plans, we tried to.
Yep, and our multi-use paths are going in along the river. They will connect across the bridge to the South Platte River Trail. So connectivity is a huge, huge focus right now.
When is the park along the river going to be?
So that's going to start, I think, February, shortly after Stock Show, once we get all the designs and bids lined up. And then we hope to have that one complete next year, but it'll probably be fall by the time that happens. Other questions? Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order? And by the way, I hope the new park actually has some beachfront property, so it looks like I can get on the canoe and just go out on the river, jump.
Yeah. At the last meeting, I asked all those present to support 2A and 2E. And I personally want to thank
every one of you that did come out in either your own way, no matter how small, no matter how big of effort you put into it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And with that, thank you all for coming out this evening. I will see you,
Sometime in November.
no, January.
Okay.
Because I'm hiding out in Philly. I'm going to a yurt or somewhere.
Oh, I'll find you. No shoes. I don't know yet. I'll check. You'll call him. We'll call him. We'll call him. We'll call him. Thank you. I will. Yeah, I think we're gonna look tomorrow. Take care. I'm here. Yeah. All right, bye. Okay.
I just spent about 3 hours setting this.